Hey friendos, Steve here. Welcome back to the channel. It's time for some of your hot takes. Man, when I leave one of these hot takes community threads up, you guys are really load them up. There's like over 250 this time, and it's only been a couple days. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Overwhelmingly, the number one hot take on this thread in terms of people upvoting it, and that's what I want you to guys do. When I post up one of these on the community thread, I want you to look through a bunch of them and see what you like and agree with, and you hit the little thumbs up or the little heart button or whatever. This first one here got liked, thumbs uped 60 times, and it's from Jamie S. Alum. I'm going to butcher this name. I'm sorry. He says, character is always more important than in-ring ability. And this is an interesting one because there is often this debate in the world of pro wrestling in terms of, hey, what actually matters? The work rate, if you have like a bunch of really, really good matches, or the character stuff. There are other takes on here and other takes I've seen in the past where people suggest the most boring part of pro wrestling is the wrestling. People like the promos, they like the character bits, they like the video packages, they like the entrances, they like the entrance music. But then you start doing them headlocks and you start doing them arm drags, and it's like, I'm tuning out. I understand. I get that. Sometimes I agree. I think the tricky part for pro wrestling is, and I'm saying this as a person who's never trained a day in their life, but as an observer, when you're putting on a match, wrestlers, they have sort of like a shorthand. They've got a language. They've got sequences that they sort of go through during the match. And it's all stuff that we've seen before. It's all sequences that we know what's going to happen. You do an Irish whip. What do? You do the leapfrog, or you do the drop down, or you do, it's like, it's all stuff that we've seen before. And the really, really, really good wrestlers know how to take those normal things and make them interesting. But those wrestlers are very few and far between. This is why Bryan Danielson is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, certainly of right now, is because he can take sort of a regular wrestling match and just turn it into something entertaining and interesting by sort of making everything that he does mean something. Not everybody does that. Sometimes, a lot of the times, a lot of wrestlers just sort of go through, I don't want to say the motions because I don't want to be rude about it, but they just sort of do that. And so you're like, okay, 70% of this match I've seen before. The other 30% is where they're actually telling the story. With Danielson, it's like the entire match matters. Nothing is taken for granted. I feel the same way about Kazuchika Okada. Right now, I feel that way about Gunther as well. There's always a different story being told by those particular wrestlers. All the good ones, that's what they do. So what are you left with beyond that? You're left with the character. You're left with the dramatic stuff. You're left with the interactions between the characters. If you look at WWE right now, which I've been praising a lot lately ever since Triple H took over, there is a heavy emphasis on character. And even when you have wrestlers who might not be too strong in the character aspect of things, oftentimes they'll still try to present interesting matchups, be it like when Bronson Reed takes on Otis, two people who character-wise, I kind of don't really care about either of those guys, but they're big dudes who know how to wrestle, and so you're going to get, oh, this is cool. It's just two big dudes, going at it. I'll be interested in that. So they give us some good matchups, or they give us wrestlers like, for example, Tommaso Ciampa. I think Tommaso Ciampa is also one of those guys who, as soon as he gets in there, everything just seems to matter. And so when he's in there in a match, even though these days I don't really care too much about his character because he's just sort of generic guy in DIY, I always enjoy his matches. I think they're always a lot of fun to watch. So I agree with this. I think a lot of people agree with this. And I kind of feel like that's one reason why AEW hasn't really found its footing over the past year to 18 months. They're always good on the wrestling aspect of things, but you need a lot more than that. You need character, you need story. Anyways, let's move on. Cameron Shank says, predictable doesn't necessarily mean bad. If a story is predictable, then it's probably because that's the best possible route for the story. Surprises are great, but I'd rather see predictable than pure shock value. I'll agree with this aspect of this. Predictable results, predictable end results are okay as long as it is an interesting journey. So, for example, I'm reasonably sure Cody Rhodes is going to beat Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. What I don't want that to feel like is a foregone conclusion. That's why I think it's more interesting for him to lose the Royal Rumble and then have to figure out and then creative has to figure out an interesting story to tell for how he gets to that match with Roman Reigns. And then during that match, which I'll be honest with you, baked into the match coming this year, if that match happens, is already what happened last year where he lost. So kind of, I feel like anything can happen. Even if he gets that match with Roman Reigns, they've already shown us that he can lose. Is he going to lose again? Are they going to make this a 3-year story? Or is this a story that's going to have a different conclusion? So I agree with your first sentence here. Predictable doesn't necessarily mean bad at all. It could be something where look, man, I'm not going to go, you go into pretty much 90% of movies, 100% of like your summertime tentpole movies, right? And the actual end of the movie, fairly predictable. In the end, the Avengers are going to beat Thanos. In what route are they going to take to get there? Are they going to take a whole other movie to get there? Because at the end of Infinity War, half the people got dithered away. But eventually they're going to. It's the journey and the surprise and twists and turns that really matters there. Man, you guys are getting deep into the mechanics of pro wrestling right now. The Anime Fans says, the Intercontinental Championship is the only WWE title that has never had a bad redesign. Also, the Intercontinental Championship hasn't had very many redesigns. Between people bringing them back and the actual redesigns being fairly minor, like the one that Cody brought back that was originally from 85 to 88 or something like that, and then Bret Hart had it. The Intercontinental Championship has had the same design for a long period of its history with minor changes and then major changes, very few major changes along the way. There was the first one, and then there was the one that we all sort of know, the one that Cody brought back when he won it 10 years ago or so. But the one obviously now is sort of the biggest sort of redesign. There was the Attitude Era one, of course, as well. But it hasn't had very many redesigns. And in terms of are any of them bad? Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I actually really like the redesign that they have now. I didn't like it originally. But it's grown on me and it looks really, really good on Gunther. So I don't want them to change that at all. I don't want them to bring back, the one that Cody had already brought back for a spell. Nova Bomb says Bayley is the best single horsewoman. She holds all the tools and masters her character. She's also possibly the best in-ring worker in WWE right now. I think people go crazy when she turns babyface again. I agree with this take, and I think it's a hot one. I think a lot of people would probably disagree with this. I think Bayley is absolutely the best horsewoman. I think technically she is the best wrestler in the ring. Whenever you look at any feud with her, the other person in the feud always comes out as a better wrestler. You can go back and look at all of her feuds. Everybody comes away from a Bayley feud as a better wrestler. Yeah, man, I think in my opinion, I feel like she's got the most charisma of everybody. I feel like she's maybe not the best talker. That might be Becky. That could be Becky, but her and Bayley are kind of neck and neck. I feel like Becky's a really, really good talker. And I think Bayley's second, then I think it's probably Charlotte, then I think it's Sasha. But I agree. I think that Bayley is like the Daniel Bryan for the women's division. I think she's that good. I really, really enjoy her work. Leg Hair says, no matter how Jack Perry returns, he will never be over or live up to the Pillar title. I don't think this is that hot. I think I probably agree with this, but time will tell. I think he's a talented guy. I don't know that the charisma is there, but sometimes it just takes unlocking something for you to find it. But again, like, that could be said of anybody. So I don't know. Live up to the pillar title. I think the pillar title. I'll be honest with you. He's still like my third favorite of the pillars. It's like MJF, Darby, Jack Perry, and then Sammy Guevara. I have no desire to see Sammy Guevara on my screen, man. I'm sorry. I don't. I just don't. JMC says, one of my most anticipated Hall of Fame inductions is Michael Cole. I hope when it happens, it's revealed on SmackDown, doing a surprise appearance by Pat McAfee, and Cole isn't informed before it's announced. I wonder when, like, that's probably going to be a long, long time before Michael Cole gets inducted. What is he, like in his 50s right now? I think it's probably going to be another 20 years before he gets inducted. Because you know he's not going to get inducted before he retires. Juan Guerrero Jr. says, Mr. Triple Mania here. My hot take is that I actually preferred it when WrestleMania was only one massive event instead of 2 nights. My reasoning is that I tend to go to WrestleMania every year, so now I have to spend double the amount on tickets for both nights instead of just one. And back when it was only one night, I felt like I got my money's worth when it was just one huge event. Also, I could attend more indie shows on Saturday when WrestleMania was, yeah, I get it. You're wrong. You're wrong, Mr. Triple Mania. WrestleMania is great the way it is now. It's 2 nights. I can't sit here for 8 hours doing these live streams, doing the watch-alongs for 8 freaking hours. It's too much. I hope they never go back. They should never, ever go back. Now they can claim to have 2 main events per year, which I think helps WWE a lot with like their video package and stuff like that, and having wrestlers being able to say that they main evented WrestleMania. So hard disagree with Mr. Triple Mania, but Juan, I love you. You know that. And I understand, like, your financial reasons, totally sound. And even when you go to WrestleMania weekend, yes, it was more convenient to go watching other stuff that weekend that's in town because there wasn't 2 nights of WrestleMania. So on that point, I agree with your take, but keep it 2 nights. I can't stand, I hated those one-night WrestleManias. Ethan SN says ECW had some of the best storytelling the business has ever seen. Raven and Sandman's purely personal feud. Raven's feud with Dreamer was great, with the whole baby storyline with Beulah, and even Dreamer's chase to the title, which he finally won and then lost in the same night. I'd have to go revisit the individual actual episodes of ECW. I remember watching, or I don't know, like learning about them when people will talk about them and seeing clips here and there, but to actually see them roll out on week-to-week television, here's my hot take. A lot of ECW's week-to-week television was actually kind of boring because I feel like their angles played out at like their big shows, and their TV was just like, you know, they'd do like one random ass match, and then Joey Styles would talk to the camera, and then they'd do another random ass match. And I feel like their weekly television was not all it's cracked up to be. But I will say this, I will pop on ECW Hardcore TV in the background just because of that sweet, sweet nostalgia nectar. Oh my God, to listen to that is to be back in the 90s. And man, the 90s, for people who don't know, if you guys weren't born, like you were born like in the late 90s or 2000s, man, the 90s were cool, man. Really cool. I'm so old. Let's move on. This one is a super interesting one. Ryan Fever says the main problem with AEW at the moment is its perception, not as much as the product. With WWE being so hot right now, I think the gap between the first and second company has become so big where it's made AEW feel very minor league and easy to poke fun and nitpick compared to how it was a couple years ago. If they were doing the current creative in 2021, I don't think people would be as brutal to the company as they are now. This is a very interesting take, and I really like the way it's phrased. I don't necessarily agree with it because, and this is just sort of one random anecdotal reason why, I just put together my list for my 10 favorite AEW moments now that we're coming up on its 5-year anniversary. From what I understand, Double or Nothing was announced like in February of 2019. So we're quickly coming up on the 5-year anniversary of when the company was sort of announced. I think it was around this time that they were like putting together the trademarks and stuff like that. So I do think that, and my point about that was my list, which has been put together, I'm going to do a video on it. My list is basically everything on it And I was honest about it. I was like, these are my favorite AEW moments. None of them have happened in the past like 2 years. And I kind of feel like if their creative now is what was going on in 2021, people would still be underwhelmed by it. Would they be as nitpicky about it? No, because they wouldn't have the reference point of their creative being really good and people being very excited about their product, as my dog jumps up on the couch. I feel like we simply would have had one bad product with WWE, because it was bad then, and one tepid product that people would probably maybe overrate at the time because it probably still would have been perceived of as better than WWE because WWE was dog shit at the time. So that's my take on it. I do think that people overrate how bad it is right now. I don't think it's that bad. I just think it's not terribly inspired right now, but it's not as bad as WWE was like in 2019, 2020, stuff like that, if that makes sense. But is the problem perception? Case could be made that it's not quite as bad as people make it out to be, I guess. But really interesting take. I think it's maybe a longer conversation. 17 says, I prefer Kofi Mania over the Daniel Bryan story of WrestleMania 30. Kofi Mania had better in-ring moments, the Gauntlets WrestleMania 35 match, and the added part of Daniel Bryan being everything he used to fight against makes it better. I don't know if I agree with one over the other. I think I still prefer the Daniel Bryan thing, even though that was so much more, I think, of the crowd giving WWE no choice but to make that moment in the main event of WrestleMania. I loved Kofi Mania. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was the last really awesome thing that Vince McMahon did as Booker of WWE. But the Daniel Bryan thing, especially how really good, like that WrestleMania where he wrestled Triple H in order to get into the match, and then he got into the match and he won it. And that match was really, really damn good. I don't know. I kind of feel like it's funny because they both had shitty actual reigns. Like Kofi's reign was really not that special, and then they just killed it with the Brock thing. Daniel Bryan, obviously, I don't even think they really wanted to do much with Daniel Bryan after he won that title, and then he just happened to get injured. And I think for WWE, they might have thought, okay, well, at least we didn't have to figure out how to, get the title off him and not piss off everybody. Hey, I think that I'll say this. The moment when Kofi won for Kofi Mania and the moment that Daniel Bryan won at WrestleMania 30, I would put those two moments on par with each other, maybe even give that edge to Kofi Mania in terms of the emotion of the moment. It is very satisfying to see Daniel Bryan finally win in a major way and see that crowd actually get that validation. It was a pretty great moment. But yeah, Kofi Mania, the emotion of that, New Day, celebrating all that stuff, boy, that was really something special. And with that, that's going to do it for the hot takes this week. Thanks, everybody, for checking them out. Appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. We'll see you around.